That's what I'm talking about. Ladies, find yourself a man that likes plant-based meat. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below. It'll give you a pretty good idea of what the horror movie syllabus is about, but in short, we usually take a look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore, but that's not what we're doing in this video. In this video, we are going to look at one specific movie and determine, is it syllabus worthy? We've been doing this for a while now, where I take recommendations by you guys from your comments in previous videos and watch movies that I have not seen before, movies that you've recommended that I haven't seen, and let you guys know what I think about it, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and ultimately deciding whether or not I think it would be syllabus worthy, if it would be good enough to be on my syllabus, or important enough or noteworthy enough to be on my syllabus. And we've had a lot of luck with this so far. The recommendations have been good to great. Everything has been a lot of fun to watch. I haven't had anything that was a terrible slog to sit through. And today's video is no exception, because I am looking at a movie called Fresh. Fresh was a movie that was recommended to me by Jazzy Wolf in our science and medicine subgenre video. And blessedly, that wasn't that much of a spoiler. It is an appropriate place to put the movie, but it's not really that much of a spoiler. And thank God, because this movie really is a surprising movie. Now, that said, I did know a little bit about it going in, because I just kind of heard some of the buzz on it. It had a lot of good buzz. So I knew a little bit going in, and unfortunately, kind of knew where the movie was going to go. And I wish I didn't, but we'll get into all that in just a few minutes. But I wanted to point out that I did have a little bit of knowledge about this movie going in, but still didn't know that much about it. And I do think that is the best way to go into, well, pretty much any movie, but especially this movie. And again, we'll get into this a little bit more. But it's also going to be a challenge to make this review without spoiling the movie, because I went back and I watched the trailer for the movie after watching it to see how much the trailer gave away, and the answer is not a lot. So I'm going to do my ever-loving best to not spoil this too much, but I'll be honest with you, even knowing that it's a horror movie is a little bit of a spoiler, so there's only so much you can do if you're going to talk about a movie. So we're going to do the best that we can in not spoiling it. But I want to thank Jazzy Wolf for the recommendation, and I want to implore all of you to leave more recommendations. Even though the to watch list is getting a little bit long, I'm having a blast with it. Hopefully, you guys are having a blast with it too, as I let you guys know my thoughts on these movies that you've recommended. And so let's go ahead and get into a review of the movie right now. As I've already said, the movie that we're talking about today is Fresh. Fresh came out in 2022. It's a pretty recent movie. Debuted, I believe, on Hulu as a streaming movie, and it got a lot of buzz. It really seemed to have a lot of positive reaction to it. I think it was a Sundance movie or one of those film festival movies before Hulu picked it up. So it had a bit of a following or a bit of a buzz around it before it even came out, and then it really seemed to do well when it came out. But I was late to the party, as I often am, because I'm doing stuff for the channel, so I've not had a chance to watch it until now, and I'm really glad I did. If you're also late to the party and haven't seen it yet, the movie is about a young woman in her 20s who is struggling with dating, using the dating apps, really not having any luck finding a guy that is, decent, and really just kind of struggling with that. And so one day she comes across a young man with superhero good looks, played by Sebastian Stan, and he charms her at the supermarket, and she gives him a chance, and she goes on a date with him, and things seem to really go well. And he is almost too good to be true, and her friend keeps kind of pointing out things that maybe are red flags, but she kind of ignores them because things are going so well until they aren't. And things take a turn for the worse, as they do in movies like this that we talk about on the horror movie syllabus. But we're going to go ahead and stop there, because like I said, I don't want to spoil this movie even more than just letting you know that it's a horror movie, because that alone is a bit of a spoiler. This movie starts out kind of like a rom-com, or at least a romantic movie, maybe a romantic satire in a way. It's really charming. It's got this likable lead, more on her in a bit, but you're just kind of following her dating life, and and kind of the losers that she winds up getting paired up with, and the struggle she has with the dating apps and stuff like that. And then she meets this charming, good-looking guy played by Sebastian Stan, and he is very charming and likable, and you're rooting for her and you're rooting for the relationship. And this goes on for a while, even though the movie is peppering in some little red flags, some things that are a little bit sus, as one of the characters says. And it's definitely kind of a thriller, kind of getting you into it. But it overall plays pretty light and it plays pretty soft. In fact, I would love to see somebody watch this movie without knowing that it's a horror movie and see how it goes, because honestly, for the first half hour you could probably sell them on it being a romantic comedy and they'd probably buy it. And it would work really well when the quote unquote twist happens. And I say quote unquote because again, we know it's a horror movie, we know that something bad is going to happen, and it doesn't really happen until half an hour in the movie. A half an hour into the movie, the title cards come up. It's the longest cold open I've ever seen. And I absolutely loved it because from that moment on, you're in a different movie. And it's not at all a romantic comedy at that point, but it is still funny and satirical. And that line is a little hard to ride, but this movie does it really, really well. I love the setup of this movie as one thing and then switching it to another thing. You've heard me talk about that before with movies. I tend to like it. Now, in this case, I kind of knew where it was going to go. And that maybe was, my biggest nitpick was not only did I know where it was going to go because I had it spoiled a little bit for me, but also the movie telegraphed a few plot points. There were a few things that I knew were going to come into play a little bit later. And I won't say what they are because if you don't pick up on them, then great, but there were a few things that I thought were obvious setups to pay off later, and they did. But even though I knew the ultimate plot of the movie, and even though I picked up on some of these, some of these plot points that were going to come back later, I still managed to be surprised by some things. I was surprised by title cards a third of the way into the movie. I was surprised by some of the things that happened and some of the decisions that the characters made in a wonderful way. I really, really liked where this movie took me, the ride that it took me on. It was great. And I liked that the movie felt authentic. Like I said, the first half hour feels kind of like a romantic comedy, but also kind of like a romantic satire. And I think that it's because it's both written by a woman and directed by a woman, written by Lauren Kahn and directed by Mimi Cave. And I'm not familiar with either of their work before, but the end result here is actually really, really good. It has an authentic feel to it. Seeing the dating world from a woman's perspective, very authentically, very real, at least, it seems to me to be real, it really rang true and made for a very sympathetic lead character. That character, played by Daisy Edgar-Jones, is wonderful. She is not somebody I'm familiar with. I looked her up. I didn't recognize anything else that she'd been in, so I don't really know her. But she reminds me of like a cross between an Anne Hathaway and a Mary Elizabeth Winstead, which is a great thing. She has a girl next door beauty and a wonderful charm about her. She's just really, really likable. So right off the bat, you're rooting for her. You're on her side and you want her to do well. You want her to find love. You want her to win. And so that really impacts you when the film takes a dark turn because you feel it. You feel for her. You're worried for her. You're scared about what's going to happen, even though, you could look back and say, girl, you shouldn't have done this and you shouldn't have done that and whatever. And, she's got a best friend in the movie that's kind of telling her some of that stuff. But you're still on her side. You never feel like she deserves the bad things that are about to happen. So I think that Daisy Edgar-Jones really anchors this movie. She's wonderful, and I'm looking forward to seeing her in other stuff because she's really great in this. And then, of course, Sebastian Stan as the love interest is wonderfully charming and handsome and also sinister. And I don't want to talk about him too much because again, we don't want to spoil the movie any more than it already is. But it's pretty clear if you know that this is a horror movie that he's not going to wind up being the man of her dreams. It's not going to go wonderfully well. And he pulls that off great. If you're familiar with Sebastian Stan as an Avenger, as a good guy, this is a fun turn for him to take. And he really plays it up well. He goes big without going hammy. He goes, kind of like it rides the line of camp in the best possible way because this movie could have easily become ridiculous, but it never really does. It really stays on a satire edge and not really on a camp edge to its benefit. It really is a wonderful movie that, again, it could have been a romantic comedy that had a kind of a, a foodie bent to it and, a little bit satirical. It could have been that, and I would have been very cool with that movie. But I really love where it went. It really was a fun ride. Like I said, even though I figured out somewhat where the movie was going ahead of time, it still managed to pull off some surprises. There were bigger surprises and little surprises. There's a character in there that seems like they're going to be a big plot point to help save the day at the end that winds up not happening, and I loved that. Again, I think that that's maybe a byproduct of the female voice, the writer and the director, kind of keeping it a female perspective so that you're really staying with the women and the outside characters are not the primary focus. They never really become the primary focus, even though they're you kind of think they're going to be. I really, really liked that. I really liked that we stayed with our protagonist and with her best friend who, eventually tries to figure out what's going on and stuff like that. It really sold it to me. Like likable characters and a believable premise that, frankly, most of this actually happens in real life. And that's what makes it pretty unsettling. The part that I'm kind of keeping secret because I don't want to spoil that, maybe a little bit more far fetched, but only a little, unfortunately. But the movie is wonderfully grounded. It has, like I think I said earlier, this authentic feeling from the dialogue, which I feel is very authentic feeling, the emotions and reactions of the characters, except for sometimes they do some things that I didn't see coming. But in retrospect, looking back at it, I still feel like it's a believable reaction. I still bought into it. But there are some moments that I feel people act in a way that I don't think I would act. But then I go back and think, Maybe I would. Maybe I would." And I know I'm dancing around a lot of stuff without giving a lot of specifics because I don't want to spoil things too much, but it's worth me not spoiling it. Like I said, a lot of you probably already know where this movie's going because, again, it had a lot of buzz. A lot of people were talking about it. But if you didn't, I'd like to try to keep at least that much from you so that you can have the experience for yourself. The movie is great. I really, really had a good time with this one. It lived up to the hype for me. It lived up to my expectations. Like I said, if I have a nitpick on it, it's that some of the plot points were a little bit telegraphed. There were some things that I was just looking at them going like, oh yeah, that's going to come back, or oh, they're going to figure out this because of this. And I was right, but it didn't matter. That's a nitpick because it still did stuff that I did not think it would do. Some shocking stuff. It's not most of the gore is implied. There is some pretty gory stuff, and when the final act kicks in, that it's pretty graphic. But for the most part, most of the gore is implied, which when you understand what the movie's about is surprising, but very effective. Leaving it to your imagination, letting you feel grossed out because of what your mind is doing to you rather than what you're seeing on the screen is wonderful. It's really well directed. I really like the camera work in this. I like the way that they kind of kept perspective for the protagonist, and like when she was altered, like you could see like the blurry camera stuff like that. There's a lot to like about this movie and the way it's shot, the way it's performed by the actors. The writing is pretty tight. Like I said, I could probably pick some holes into it, but why? Because I'm having a good time. Movie is a blast, and it would definitely be a high recommend from me. But does that make it syllabus worthy? Well, let's find out. So, is fresh syllabus worthy? Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. It's a wonderful movie. I really, really liked it. And I'm always a little wary when I go in with high expectations for a movie that's gotten a lot of buzz because I tend to be disappointed. I get my expectations a little too high. It doesn't meet the expectations, and I'm bummed out. That didn't happen here. This movie did what I wanted it to do and then some. It really did deliver. It really paid off. It's just everybody across the board is good in the movie. The direction is good. The story idea isn't 100% super original, but it's original enough or fresh enough, if you will. And it also is told in a fresh way or a neat perspective of, from a young Gen Z woman who's just trying to get through the dating world and these dating apps. That's not me. I'm not that demographic at all, but I appreciated that perspective because it feels a little bit different than other movies of this type that we've seen. And very, very different from other movies of this type that I won't spoil. But those of you who know what it's about, you know what I'm talking about. So, is it syllabus worthy? Absolutely. The question would just be, where would I put it? Now, Jazzy Wolf had recommended putting it in science and medicine, and I see that because there's a character who's a doctor, and there's some doctor stuff in there. We'll just leave it at that, and that would make sense. That would fit, and actually, that's probably a good place to squeeze it into because some of the other categories might be a little bit tougher because of the competition for it. Like I could see this being a great entry into the feminist subgenre because it really has that strong female voice, even though it's not the most obvious feminism movie. It feels like it has that feminist voice that I really liked. I think it was a big asset for the movie. So I could see wanting to put it there. You could arguably put it in a slasher subgenre. There's some places you could put it. There's one really obvious place to put it that I would love to talk about, but I'm not going to. but y'all know which one I'm talking about. It would be a big spoiler to tell you about that. So we're not going to do that, but there's a few places you could squeeze it into, and it's worth squeezing it in on your syllabus because it's that good. It really paid off. It really did live up to the expectations. It's a movie that I am going to try to make other people watch without telling them it's a horror movie. Like I have, most of my friends in real life, as they say online, are not horror fans. It's the whole reason I started this channel is to meet you guys and talk horror with you. And so I'm going to try to convince some of my friends who maybe don't like horror, but we're down for a rom-com to watch this movie without knowing what it's about and just see the fallout and see what happens and see if they're still my friends afterwards. I'll let you guys know how that goes out if I manage to pull it off. But for now, I'll just go ahead and thank you guys for the recommendation. Jazzy Wolf, thank you for the recommendation. Thank you guys all for the recommendations, and keep them coming because they are great. This one was a slam dunk for me. But now it is time for a horror trivia pursuit card. I'm gonna read this card live on the air if I can get my glasses on, without cutting and answer it and see if I get it right and see if I'm smart. And let's go ahead and go with the psychological category because Fresh is kind of a psychological horror movie, kind of. And so the question is this. What Korean filmmaker directed 2013's Stoker? Oh, I'm pretty sure I know this one, and I'm hoping I don't confuse myself with this. For those of you who watch the videos regularly, you know that I have this streak lately, especially, of trying to talk myself out of the answer or trying to not talk myself out of the answer. Um, and I feel like that's another situation where it could happen here, and I'm not going to let it happen. I had the answer pop into my head as soon as I read the question, and I'm just going to stick with it. But I'm going to prattle on just a smidge to give you guys a chance. We did talk about Stoker, if I recall correctly, on the channel. Great movie. Absolutely fantastic. High recommend for that movie. And the director is a well-known Korean director. Uh, but there are a lot of other Korean movies we talked about because I love me some Korean horror movies. And debatable about Stoker. I'm glad to see this pop up on these horror trivia pursuit cards because Stoker is arguably more drama slash thriller than it is horror. But I will stand by it being horror because I think, well, first of all, I think everything is horror, and I also think that movie has some horrific stuff in it. But I've kind of bounced around, long enough to give you guys some time to think. Let me tell you my thought process here. I have the answer that popped into my head, and then I had a second answer that popped up. And I'll tell you this. So hopefully you got your answer already locked in. So my answer was going to be Park Chan-wook. Park Chan-wook is, I'm almost positive, is the director of Stoker, and I'm going to be really embarrassed if it's not. But because Bong Joon-ho is the second name that popped in my head, because we talk about Bong all the time. Like he's so great, but I'm almost positive he didn't do Stoker. I'm almost positive that he didn't, even though I love Stoker and it feels like something he could have made. I'm almost positive it's Park Chan-wook, like 99% sure. So hopefully you've got your answer locked in. Park Chan-wook is what I'm going with. Let's go ahead and take a look at the question, and it is Park Chan-wook. I was getting ready to be embarrassed. That's what happens is I get worried that I'm going to embarrass myself with the wrong answer. And so I start second guessing. And I don't know why. We're all friends here. You wouldn't care if I got the answer wrong. I've gotten the answer wrong many times. So I don't know what I'm worried about. But I hope you guys got it right. I got it right. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Thank you very much for hanging out and talking about Fresh. Thank you about recommending it to me. And for our other recommendations, leave them down in the comments below. And then next week we'll be doing something different. But until then, class dismissed.